Tennessee's Supreme Court delaying a second execution due to the coronavirus pandemic. Byron Black's execution scheduled for October 8th, but the court moved it to April 8th, 2021. His attorneys saying the pandemic made it impossible to have a hearing on whether he is competent to be executed. Black was convicted by a Nashville court of murdering his girlfriend and her two daughters at their home in 1988.
He sits silently in a wheelchair, his gaze empty, his mind lost in the fog of schizophrenia. With an IQ of just 68, Byron Black barely understands where he is, let alone the fact that the state of Tennessee is preparing to execute him. On August 5th, 2025, this mentally ill, frail man may be strapped into the electric chair. But this isn't just a story about mental illness or capital punishment. It's a haunting journey that began nearly 4 decades ago, with a night so violent and tragic that it still casts a long shadow over Nashville. It was a calm Sunday, March 20th. A 29-year-old nurse and devoted mother of 2 young daughters had just finished a long shift at Vanderbilt Hospital. That night, her sister came to pick her up. In the back seat were Angela's little girls Latoya, age 9, and Leisha, just 6. After a short visit to Angela's mother's home, the family returned to their apartment, but Angela had left something behind. Around 11 p.m., she drove back alone to pick up an iron she'd forgotten. It was a quick trip. She spoke briefly with her mother, collected the item, and by 11:20 p.m. she made one final call to say she had arrived home safely. That call would be the last time anyone heard from her. The following day brought a growing sense of dread. Angela's mother called repeatedly, but there was no answer. As hours passed, that worry turned to panic. By 9:30 p.m., unable to wait any longer, the family contacted the police. Officers arrived to find Angela's car parked outside. The blinds were drawn. No lights, no signs of movement. With no response at the door, they entered the apartment through a bedroom window and stepped into a scene of unimaginable horror. Inside, the silence was suffocating. In one of the children's bedrooms, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness and landed on the lifeless body of Leisha. She had been shot twice, once in the chest, once in the pelvis. An abrasion on her tiny arm hinted at a desperate attempt to shield herself. In the master bedroom, Angela lay on the bed, a single gunshot wound to her head. She had likely died instantly, never waking, but the worst was yet to come. Near the bed, wedged between the mattress and a chest of drawers, Layla. She too had been shot twice, in the chest and neck. Unlike her mother, both girls survived the initial attack, enduring several minutes of unimaginable pain before they died. As detectives combed the crime scene, a chilling clue emerged, one that pointed to someone who had not only been inside the apartment but had lingered. The phones had been moved. The kitchen phone's receiver was found in the master bedroom. The bedroom phone, strangely, was in the hallway. On these devices, forensic experts lifted 3 fingerprints. They all belonged to one man, Byron Lewis Black. Within a year, Black was arrested and brought to trial. On March 10, 1989, he was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder for Angela, Latoya, and Leisha. For killing the youngest, he was sentenced to death, and for decades, that sentence remained. But time has changed. Byron Black, the man awaiting execution today, is not the same as the one convicted in 1989. He is now physically disabled, heavily medicated, and mentally broken, barely aware that he's even on death row. The road to the electric chair is never straight, and in the case of Byron Lewis Black, it's a labyrinth of legal twists, emotional weight, and moral uncertainty. His execution is set for August 5th, 2025. But behind that date lies a decades-long courtroom drama that challenges the very definition of justice. Is justice about vengeance, closure, or fairness? And can we truly call it justice when the man awaiting death is barely aware of the world around him? It all began on March 10, 1989, inside a hushed Nashville courtroom. The air was tense. The only sound, the quiet shuffle of papers and the ticking of a brass clock that seemed to count down to something irreversible. Standing at the center was Byron Black, then 33 years old, charged with an unthinkable crime. The execution-style murders of Angela Clay and her 2 daughters. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a break-in, but Byron's fingerprints were found on the telephones inside the apartment, a detail that would prove damning. To make matters worse, Byron had already been convicted of shooting Angela's estranged husband, Benny Clay. That history loomed large, staining his claims of innocence with doubt. The jury didn't hesitate. In unanimous agreement, they declared him guilty of all 3 murders. Yet when it came time to deliver the punishment, the court took a more nuanced path. Byron was handed to life sentences for the deaths of Angela and Latoya. But for little Ishi, just 6 years old, her life violently stolen before it even had a chance to begin, the court issued the ultimate penalty. That moment marked only the beginning. As with so many capital punishment cases, the trial was the first chapter in a long and torturous legal journey. On August 5, 1991, the Tennessee Supreme Court heard Byron's appeal. The outcome was razor close. Just a single vote could have changed his fate. But the 3-2 decision sealed it. The death sentence would stand. And from that moment forward, Byron's life became a revolving door of courtrooms, appeals, petitions, and legal delays. Each year that passed brought new questions, not just about the crime, but about the man himself. Over time, Byron's physical and mental health crumbled. Diagnosed with schizophrenia and now wheelchair-bound, he spends most days in silence, lost in a haze of confusion. He can barely follow conversations, let alone grasp the reality that he may be executed. This isn't the same man who once stood trialists, a man unraveling, broken, and unaware. And that raises a chilling dilemma. Is it ethical or even lawful to execute someone who no longer understands what's happening to him? The long journey toward Byron Lewis Black's execution has been anything but straightforward. Though his death sentence was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court on June 4, 2018, effectively granting Tennessee the legal authority to proceed his case, remained far from over. What followed was not just another legal chapter, but a deeper, more urgent conversation. Not about guilt or innocence, but about the limits of human understanding and the evolving standards of justice. In 2021, Tennessee passed a landmark law, making its ban on executing individuals with intellectual disabilities retroactive for the first time. It was a turning point acknowledging that justice must grow with society's moral awareness. And then, something extraordinary happened. Davidson County District Attorney Glenn Funk, the very person responsible for upholding Byron's conviction, publicly supported the defense's claim. Byron Black met the legal and clinical definition of intellectual disability and, under the new law, should not be executed. This was not a gesture of mercy, but a conclusion grounded in science. 2 of Tennessee's own trusted mental health experts, both frequently used by state prosecutors, also confirmed Byron's diagnosis. Yet the system did not bend. In March 2022, Senior Judge Walter Kurtz denied the motion to declare Byron intellectually disabled. His reason: the issue had already been decided in previous federal rulings, and therefore could not be revisited under the new law. It was a decision that sparked serious ethical concern. If someone is now, by current legal standards, recognized as intellectually disabled, can the state still justify his execution because of past procedural rulings? The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the decision even with the district attorney's support and the consensus of medical experts. As Judge Camille McMullen asked during oral arguments, we have a constitutional duty not to execute intellectually disabled individuals, right? If we interpret the statute the way you've interpreted it, we wouldn't be doing that, right? It's a haunting question that still lingers. On March 3, 2025, Tennessee's Supreme Court acknowledged the finalization of a new lethal injection protocol and rescheduled Byron Black's execution date to August 5, 2025. With that, the machinery of the state began moving once again toward an ending that feels more like a reckoning. But to truly understand the weight of what's about to happen, one must look beyond legal documents and into the life of the man now facing death. Byron Lewis Black was born on March 23, 1956, in Nashville, Tennessee. His childhood was marked by hardship, with family testimony revealing that his mother reportedly drank heavily and smoked throughout her pregnancy, factors now known to impact brain development. From a young age, Byron struggled in school, displaying learning difficulties, poor academic performance, and signs of intellectual impairment that went largely ignored. He left school early and found work in simple, repetitive jobs. Colleagues described him as quiet and polite, someone who didn't stand out. Outwardly, his life seemed ordinary.
But signs of instability had already begun to emerge. In 1986, Byron was convicted of shooting Benny Clay, the estranged husband of Angela Clay, the woman he would later be accused of murdering, along with her 2 daughters. Though Benny survived, That act left an undeniable stain on Byron's record. At the time of the triple homicide in March 1988, Byron was on a weekend furlough from serving his sentence for the earlier shooting. It was during one of those temporary releases that the murders occurred. Today, Byron Black is 69 years old. He has spent more than 33 years on death row, his mind and body steadily deteriorating. Multiple medical evaluations have confirmed he now suffers from significant brain damage, consistent with his history of developmental impairment and long-term psychiatric issues. Yet despite his condition, despite changing laws, and despite the support of his own prosecutors, the clock continues to count down. Byron Lewis Black once stood in a courtroom as a man accused of unimaginable violence, but today, nearly 4 decades later, that same man is no longer who he was. He sits slumped in an office chair pushed through prison corridors, no longer able to walk, diagnosed with schizophrenia, suffering from heart failure and degenerative joint disease. His body is failing, but even more alarming is his mind. Evaluations have revealed significant brain damage and intellectual disability. He barely comprehends his surroundings, let alone the punishment looming over him. And yet, the state of Tennessee has set his execution date for August 5, 2025. What makes this case even more haunting is that the very prosecutors who once argued for his death now agree Byron Black should not be executed. In 2022, Davidson County District Attorney Glenn Funk acknowledged that Byron meets the clinical standards for intellectual disability. 2 of the same mental health experts who previously testified for the state now stand behind that diagnosis. But despite overwhelming agreement, the courts refused to reopen the issue, citing past federal rulings. Judge Walter Kurtz denied the motion, and his decision was upheld on a power-provoking ethical outrage and judicial concern. During a hearing, Judge Camille McMullen posed a critical question. If we interpret the law this way, aren't we violating our constitutional duty? But still, the clock ticks forward. The Tennessee Supreme Court has affirmed Byron's execution date. His attorneys have made a final plea to the governor, but no intervention has come. And so, the state prepares to execute a man whom nearly every doctors, defense attorneys now agrees, may not even understand why. Is this justice? Or has the law become so bound by procedure that it has lost sight of its humanity? As August 5th approaches, Tennessee isn't just facing an execution, it's facing a reckoning. And in that final hour, the question won't be just whether Byron Black dies, but whether compassion did too.